right. I wanted to do an intro myself, but thank you very much. That's done. Let's skip it. The only thing that I want to add is a couple months back, I joined a startup called Serverless. And there we do AWS has a new feature since a year, which is called Lambda. So you can simply upload your code, and you never have to take care of any instances. They will just boot up based on your traffic and take them down. And that's pretty cool, because I think that's the future of like how microservices will be done. You just upload your code, and someone else will take care of it. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that. Recently open sourced the boilerplate with GraphQL, how to use it, so you can wrap your REST APIs. All right, but this day, I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about Draft.JS editing, rich text editing. And let me first start out with like, who of you ever had to deal with rich text editing on the web? Wow, that's a lot of people. Awesome. I have good news for you. So you all know this pretty much. You can do, you can make text bold, italic. You can do lists, headlines, all sorts of stuff. But there's another notion to that. Sometimes we want to have more advanced features where we create actually entities, like add mentions. So in this case, this is actually a plugin that I used, a jQuery plugin that I used like probably 6 years ago or so. And this was, when I found this, I was super excited about it, because it lets you have a text area, apply the mention onto it, and then what it did is it basically overlaid text area with mention features. So you could go in there, and you can see it in the text area. I'm typing here. I typed here, hello Ken. Actually, you can't see it here. But in the end, what happened is that this plugin overlaid the mention after I auto-completed, and that's pretty cool. Nevertheless, I find it a bit boring, or not boring, but it's kind of sad, because you don't have these features in the text area itself. You actually need to do something on top of it, and you need to overlay. And then whenever you overlay this div, you absolutely need to make sure that in every browser, the styles look exactly the same. It's not moving. The characters underneath in the text area, in the div above, is always the same, and it doesn't differentiate. And that's pretty tricky. And I didn't find this to be the ideal solution. Especially adding features here was pretty hard. All right, so you can see here, but still we had this div on top, and beneath there was the text area. All right, so far so good. So how can we fix this? So how can we actually edit HTML? There's a pretty cool attribute, which is called content editable. You simply set it to true. And what happens is, if you do that, then you actually can edit. So if you set that true, any kind of user can simply edit content on the web page live. People can do a return, and they get a new line, and that's pretty amazing. So let's look inside the div that was set content editable true. Is that when I hit return, it actually created a new div, and then I could type something in. This is cool. The line break in the div is a bit weird, not my most favorite structure, but OK, pretty cool feature. This, nevertheless, we don't use this, and we can easily explain this, because if I do the same thing, and I did this earlier today, if you do the same thing in Firefox, actually we get complete different content. So the content is the same, but the HTML tags are used to represent this content are different. So you have, if I do this in Firefox, we have line breaks, and at the end there's this line break with type mods. I don't know why, but that's what it is. And this makes it really hard to use this, because I don't even know what IE would do and what other browsers would do. And this is a bit unfortunate. So, and there's even people, like, for example, the Nik Santos works at Medium, and Medium is probably, I would say, still the gold standard for like rich text editing. It has a pretty good experience. And this guy wrote a whole blog post. This is the actual title of the blog post, Why Content Editable is Terrible. And he basically started to do a mathematical proof why the whole thing is broken. Not going to go into that. But yeah, that's it. So should we leave it with this? No, we don't. I want to take a little side story to actually show what happened to me, and I figured out this is a pattern that happened to a lot of other user experience developers who had to deal with rich text editing. So the story for most of them, all of them actually, started out: you're born, it's pretty exciting, you made it to life, awesome. You become a teenager, which is a harder time. Usually you have your first kiss, which is super amazing. And right after your first kiss, obviously your first breakup, you think like, why me? Pretty sad, then life continues. It has its ups and downs. As developers, I noticed we have a pretty good life. Most people are quite happy. And then Draft.JS was released. So what is Draft.JS? Draft.JS is a framework for building rich text editors in React, built and used within Facebook. It got released earlier this year at the ReactConf, and it powers basically all sorts of rich text editing experience in Facebook that you can find nowadays. So comments, notes, status updates. How this looks like: if I do a status update earlier today, you will see this. It will actually create different things that we have seen in Chrome, and you can do cool things. You can do with Draft.js cool features like add mentions. So the add mentions in Facebook is powered by Draft.js, and the whole editing experience, the hashtags, all that stuff is Draft.js. You might have seen this. Facebook has this notes editor, so you can do cool things like bold, italic, and that gets us actually very close to what we know is the gold standard, the medium editor. And you can do these things like use images, center them left, right, basically change the block there. Pretty cool. All right, and in the end, it's still HTML. People are not, there's no like text area hidden beneath it, and you change stuff in that text area. You actually change the real HTML, because on top of it, there's still content editable. But the core of Draft.js, what it's doing, is actually fixing content editable for us. And that's pretty cool. So how does it work? The core concept of Draft.js is that whenever you change, it syncs the state and the representation. So whenever you change something in your HTML, whenever you do a new line, it will actually update the state. And this state will be rendered again back to the representation. And there's a continuous loop. So you could actually only update the state and enter a new block in there. And what happens is the same will automatically sync back to the representation. And you can keep a data structure, whatever it may look like, completely in sync with the representation. And this is super powerful. What I personally like a lot about it is that the whole thing is immutable. So whenever you get a new state back, whenever a change happened, you actually get the full thing back as an immutable data structure. And under the hood, it uses immutable.js, and this also makes it very efficient in terms of memory, because we can store the whole undo and redo stack. And because it's immutable.js under the hood, immutable.js allows us to reuse a lot of the data that is in there, and so we don't increase the memory a lot. It's a lot of references, but that doesn't add a lot of memory, instead of having the complete thing and storing it multiple times. Cool. And the third aspect, and this is, for me, the most important reason why to use Draft.js, or any editor that has this feature, is you can convert the state that you have, although it's immutable.js, immutable structure. You can convert it to plain JSON, and you can restore the whole same editor experience, the whole same setup. You can restore the state from the same JSON that you exported, basically. And this is super powerful, because you can take this JSON and you can actually store it in your database, and you have a data structure. You can send it to your to your servers, and you can take this data structure, you can figure out things about this data structure. Why is this important? Because if you look at WordPress, for example, and by no means I want to bash on WordPress here. WordPress is a fantastic product. I use it myself. But they do one thing that gives me goosebumps, which is I created this, this new blog post. So I said, like, this is my first blog post. I made a list with first, second. I added an image. And what you can see here is that whenever I hit save, it actually sends the raw content in HTML to the server. And this is, if you have a very simple structure, OK, you can still pass this. What is like really weird is they have align none, size full, VP image 7. There's like state information actually in the HTML there. And if you ever want to migrate that stuff, I think that will be tricky. Because you might think like, OK, I can go through my database and pass. If I want to go from size full to size full size, I could go through my database and find all the entries and replace size full every time with size full size. Nah, not yet. What if some user types size full in there? Pretty tricky. So you have to actually figure out that this size full is part of an image, and that starts to get complex. And it's a never-ending story. In addition, if I switch to my HTML mode, somebody could simply write a script tag in there. And that script tag gets sent to the server as well. So you have that script tag. If you don't take care of sanitization, actually people could inject script tags into your website. This is a problem. Luckily, WordPress is good enough, and I guess they have a lot of experience with this, so they actually sanitize it. And what they do is they remove the script tags. So what you can see on my blog post now, where I put my script tag in there, you can see the console log as a text there. And by no means, I'm not sure if this is the best way, if I would remove the whole content of the script tag or not. In general, I believe this should never end up there. All right. So these are the features of Draft.JS and why I believe it's super powerful and we should all use it. Let me show you how to use that. So it starts out with we build a simple React component, and in this case, I say that it's a class, it's my editor, and I want to import the editor from Draft.js as well as the editor state. And then I put an editor state into my component state. Obviously, you can put that in Redux as well. Can be Redux, can be MobX, whatever you use, or some other state management library. But in this case, I instantiate an editor state with create empty. So this would be an empty text field, basically, or an empty editor state with nothing in there, no text in there. I can use the editor component. I simply render the editor component, and I use onChange to get a new state and set this locally again, and this again. So I told you before that it actually happens, the update happens automatically. That's not entirely true. What happens is, like, on every change, you get the full new editor state, and you have full control over if you actually want to put that again and display that, or if you want to manipulate or sanitize that, or whatever you want to do. So in the end, if you ever read the React documentation, the forms part, there's this difference between uncontrolled and controlled components. So basically, the editor of Draft.js behaves like a controlled component. You have this constant loop that you actually in charge of. All right, so what does this give us? Unfortunately, yet not much. It's basically an empty editor. What if we type in hi? There's a lot of things that we can do now. Unfortunately, none of the features that Facebook has are in the core of Draft.js, because Draft.js is just a framework to build these kind of features. So we don't have add mentions here. We don't have image support here. We have a plain editor with a framework that allows us to do cool stuff. I'm gonna show you a little bit of like what we can do, but to first get into that, like my goal for today is to actually make it very easy for you to get started. So when I will start out is like show you the state. What happens? I want to show you the structure of like what does an editor state looks like, and that's a lot. So that starts from the top left and ends at the bottom right. There's a lot of stuff in there. Unfortunately, you don't have to take care. You don't need to care a lot about it. And we're going to break it down. So let's break it down. I told you we have the editor state. And there are two really important parts that you're going to use if you build features with Draft.JS. There are two important parts that you can use most of the time. At least I did. One is the content state, and the second is the selection state. The selection state, so there's an important fact there. That every time you do anything, you just change the selection of what is selected on your website, in the editor, you actually get a new state, and it has the selection state in there. And you can do a lot of crazy things with it. But you have full control of like everything that happens in the DOM. Maybe a selection, maybe a new character, maybe a new image. Every time you get a new state, and you have full control over it. And it contains connection and content. And you can also set the selection. So this is an important fact that, for example, if you have the add mentions and you want to do some auto-completion, you type in add MA, and I want to see the auto-completion with max, I type in max. I'm actually going to remove that content. I'm going to put in the add mention, and I want to set the selection right after the last character of the add mention. That's why selection is an important part here. Let's break down the content state. So content state, there's basically 3 levels. There's this concept of blocks. So every time you do a new paragraph, you have a new block. That's the idea. But blocks don't necessarily have to be text. They also can contain, you can set the block type, and you could say a block type should be atomic and have an entity of a sticker. Or you could even create your own sticker type of atomic block and then render different things based on that block. So it's very dynamic. Basically, everything in the rendering part you can change with Draft.js. And a block has 2 parts. It has a text, which is, in our case, the hi, and the character list. So let's break our hi down and see what we can do there. We have a block map. We have our first block here. You can see the blocks contain an object, and every time you create a new block, there will be a new block object. You have the key inside, so if you get a block, you can at least figure out which block it is. So there's a little bit duplication, but it's comes in very handy. We have a type of each block. In this case, it's unstyled, which basically means there's a few types that are there, and unstyled basically means like basic text, nothing special. Then you see the text, and what's very interesting is that for text we have character list. So for every character in this text, we have a separate entity and a separate object, which contains style and entity. So this allows us to basically attach different styles, and this could be underline or strike through. You can apply these to each character, and you can also attach entities. This comes in handy when you do, for example, add mentions. Then you want to attach, for example, the entity, the person max you want to attach to a series of characters, and you know exactly what's happened there, and you can use this and leverage this for rendering. All right. So let's break it down again. Content state, we have our block, we have one block, and we have the text with the character list. Just to repeat this, if we do hello, we have our text hello, and for every character, we have an entry within our character list. Pretty cool. Break it down again, pretty simple. So let's get a little bit more fancy to understand like how you can manipulate stuff. In this case, this title is a headline 2, and the first 2 characters, I made them underlined. So my block would change from normal unstyled to headline 2, so header 2. And only the first 2 characters in the character list have the style underlined. So how can you use this? Now that we know a little bit about the structure, how Draft.js organizes its stuff internally, Draft.js exposes a lot of functions, or actually properties, that you can use to render different things and do stuff. And this is not that easy, unfortunately, but it's super, super powerful. So that's pretty cool, because you can do all sorts of stuff. And I quickly go through them, and I'm gonna show you how to use one of them. So there's the block render map, because I already told you we have block renders block types. And then you basically have this mapping, and you can define what type should render to which HTML tag. We have a block render function. So in this case, you could completely customize how blocks are rendered, which you're going to use if there's, for example, if you have a block type of sticker, I could customize and render a custom sticker block. We have block styles, which applies a class name based on a block type. We have decorators, which allow you to basically take any text within a block, and you can find it. Usually I use regular expressions with this, and you can wrap it. This is pretty cool for hashtags, because you can find basically any word that starts with an hash. And if you found that, you wrap it with a span, and this span has a different class with a style of a hashtag, and then you have a hashtag feature. Pretty cool. And you have custom style maps. You can, again, map different styles based on that. And in addition, Draft.js comes with a lot of cool tools. Like, you don't have to, the thing that we saw with underline, changing the style, there's a utility function to actually, if you have some piece of text selected, you actually can take this and you can apply this with this utility function, with the rich utils, and change that. You don't have to completely do everything by yourself and change the structure and fully understand it. You can fall back and just use a lot of these tools here. There are atomic blocks, which are useful for videos, for images, for embeds, all that kind of stuff. Modifiers, entities, so you can attach a lot of things. And obviously, as I already mentioned, you can convert it to raw, which basically gives you this JSON representation that you can use, and then convert from and raw to. All right, let me tell you about the block render function, because with this thing, we can do unicorn stickers, and that's what we all care about, at least for now. So how can we do this? What we see from our example before, we still have our My Editor component, and the only things that we change now is we provide our own My Block renderer as property for the property block render fn, for block render function. And how does this look like? In the beginning, I just create my own component for the sticker, and then I have my own block render function. And the block render function gets a block as a first argument, and from this block you can get the type. In this case, I added a block to my Draft.js content state, which is of type sticker, and then I can simply return render this block with the sticker component and provide the props unicorn1, and then in the end I get so what happens here is that in the end, when I have this, in this case, it looks like we have one block that is just unstyled of text, and the second block is our sticker, which is of type sticker, and then we can actually render the sticker. And that's pretty cool, because now you have the power to, in your text editing domain, in your rich text editing domain, in this text editor, you can do everything. You can render every component, anything, just based on the type of the block. And that is super, super powerful. All right. There's one problem that I personally have with the concept of Draft.js is if you use all these utility properties to do your own things, for example, handle a before input and do stuff, handle dropped files, apply a custom style map, you end up with a component that looks pretty heavy. and hard to understand. And in the end, you also have to squeeze in, if you have different features, you want to render stickers and YouTube videos, you have to squeeze them in the same my-block-render function. This absolutely makes sense if you only want to build one or two editors that are useful for your use case. But it's a big problem. At least I figured it was a problem for me, because not in every case I want to have the same features for every text field. And when Draft.JS came out, I was fortunate. I was at the open source retreat of Stripe, which was really cool because I could work on any open source project that I want. And I was super fascinated and interesting, like after Draft.js came out, what will people do with it? And what happened is in the first 2 weeks, you could see like 5, 6 different projects coming up, everybody implementing its own full-fledged editor, everybody having different bugs, and everybody having only this full thing, and you could have all the features on none. And this kind of makes sense for some use cases, but I wanted to take it further. So I started to work on a project together with a couple of other people, and we built Draft.js plugins. And what Draft.js plugins is basically an plugin architecture with just using a wrapper component on top of the Draft.js editor. So what it does, it gives you a lot of features like hashtags. Because we not only wanted to build this architecture, we want to actually prove that you can have these different features, and you can plug them in and have them ready to go, and you don't have to build everything by yourself. Because Facebook built this immense cool framework for us, but it didn't implement, or it didn't release all the cool features. So I thought, like, OK, I have time. I get paid well enough, so let's just focus on that and build a couple of cool features so other people can reuse it, and even I in the future. So we built this thing with Draft.js plugins architecture. And the first feature is like hashtags and how it looks like. It's not a lot of code, because you don't have to fiddle with all the state internally. You don't have to deal with like modifiers and so on. You simply create a hashtag plugin. The only thing that is different, because we have this wrapper component, you not only can take the Draft.js editor, but you have to take our editor, that is this couple hundred lines wrapper around the original Draft.js to make the magic happen. Take this editor, but apart from that, it behaves exactly the same like Draft.js, except for one thing. It has a plugins. It allows you to pass in a plugins property, and there you can give it a list of plugins. So the hashtag feature that you have seen, it was just creating the hashtag plugin. Using that, when you create the hashtag plugin, you can provide in some configuration depending on what you want. And this hashtag plugin uses the same hashtag parsing as Twitter, which is an immensely complex library. It's not too long, but they covered over the last couple of years a lot of like crazy edge cases that you want to have with hashtags. And basically, you don't need to take care about that. You can just use this plugin, and it works out of the box. We built a lot of other cool things like emojis, so you can get the Slack-like experience for emojis. And it also is not much work. You simply import the emoji plugin. You create the plugin out of it. What it has emoji suggestions, so you pass in the plugin. And the only thing that is different, because you don't want to have, what we learned on the way is, you don't want to have this auto-completion in your content, because this has to be content editable false, and then it would break the whole flow of the content editable. So we learned you actually want to have this either before or after your editor. So what we did is, we made the API work that you actually can have the auto-suggestion part afterwards. Last but not least, it's actually not the entirely last one, but like this is the absolute most famous plugin. There's like tons of people using it. Is just add mentions out of the box, and there's like almost every day I see people starting to use that, and I get questions about it, and I'm super happy about it. And it's a little bit sad, but it also makes me proud. There's actually people using Angular, and they made the decision just to pull in the dependencies React Immutable.js, Draft.JS, and Draft.js plugins editor, and Draft.js mentions plugin, just to get that feature, because they couldn't find any other way, like add mentions working out of the box for them, ready to set up. Yeah, and how you do it, you create your add mentions. This can come from the server. You import that, you create it, and then same as for the emoji plugin, you put in the mention plugin, the mention suggestions, and you're done. We did a lot of other cool things like counters, Linkify. You can automatically get links for your, whenever you see it detects a link, it will make it a link. Again, we have stickers. The base example uses unicorns, because this is just cool. But this is not the end. It actually, that's just the beginning, because one guy, Benjamin Kifler, started to build one of these crazy editors, was the WYSIWYG editor, and he built basically any feature that you can imagine nowadays that you can see in Medium. He built this in this big editor that he built by himself. And what he started to do, he started to convert all that stuff to plugins. And we're currently preparing the 2.0 release, where we get all these plugins in there. And then you have the image support, table support, embed support, all sorts of crazy stuff. And last but not least, I think Draft.js is also just the beginning of a new era of editors, which allow us to do these cool things. And I want to give a shout out to Ironstorm Taylor, who had a lot of impact on the architecture and design of the plugin architecture that we did. And he actually started to build his own editor, which is called Slate. And he's currently converting the whole system to be usable for collaborative editing. And this is super interesting, because I think we can leverage this in the future, and we'll see a lot of cool things happening. And it will be super easy to do rich text editing in the future. It's already way, way easier than it has been a year ago. But expect to see in the next couple of years a lot of things cool happen. And that's it. Thank you very much.